This interview is part of the Living Legends collection of the Oklahoma Historical Society. It is an interview with Mr. Doane R. Farr, interviewed April 9, 1971 by Pendleton Woods in Clinton, Oklahoma. It is being copied for inclusion in the permanent collection of the Oral History Program on March 12, 1990 by Joel Todd.
This is Penn Woods. The date is, it's Good Friday of 1971. I'm in Clinton, Oklahoma, in the offices of the Clinton Daily News, and I'm visiting with Mr. Doane Farr. I presume that's Doane. It's D-O-A-N-E, R. Farr, F-A-R-R, who is lives in Clinton and whose family is Pioneer Oklahoma family, and he was born in Nebraska, although he claims to be an Oklahoman because his family was from Oklahoma, and he simply went up there because your uncle, I believe, was the doctor, your grandfather was the doctor who did the delivery and lived in Nebraska at that time. Mr. Farr, I think I'll just hand you the mic and we'll visit just a little bit on, more or less at random, on a number of things, but to begin with, I would like for you to tell us something about your grandfather and your grandmother and their coming to Oklahoma during the early days.
Grandpa.
Tell who they are first, I think.
Grandpa Farr, Melvin A. Farr, and my grandmother came to Oklahoma from Chadron, Nebraska, where he'd been in the dairy business. But arriving in Oklahoma City, and I'm sorry that I don't have the dates, but he had a wagon yard on the site of adjacent to the site of the President Huckins Hotel in Oklahoma City. Then as time went on, he being a true pioneer, and there being too many people in Oklahoma City at that time, he began to move westward with the Rock Island Railroad as the Rock Island was built westward. And after arriving in El Reno, he made a connection with the El Reno Mill and Elevator Company to sell and distribute their line of feeds and flour. And then began a teaming operation from El Reno westbound to the cities. Then made a connection with continued the connection with the El Reno Mill and Elevator Company to distribute their products in the towns as the railroad moved west, and had a carload of their products on the first train arriving at all of the towns between Gary and including Sayre westbound. In each case, he had built a small warehouse in advance of the shipment coming in, and from there distributed the flour and feed. One of my earliest recollections is going with Granddad to deliver flour to the adjacent communities and country stores, and riding home under the seat covered with a very pliable and very comfortable buffalo skin.
Do you recall any of the experiences? Did your granddad recall any experiences to you in his Oklahoma City operation that you remember?
No, I don't recall any of
You don't
those.
know any at all?
No.
Do you recall any other experiences that your granddad told you about any of his operations after he began to move west of Oklahoma City?
It was a very successful operation in those days, but the hardships of distribution and of housing and of and delivery were difficult.
What were some of the problems?
Well, the problems were roads, just trails. And by the way, in that regard, you can still see from the air the marks of the original dirt route between westward in a good many spots between here and Oklahoma City.
Wagon ditches.
Yeah, wagon trails.
Now, your grandmother was quite active in the cultural area of western Oklahoma, and at a time, I suppose, when culture was probably not as popular as it might be today, when there is more leisure time. Did you tell me what she did in this area?
She was a cultured woman and quite well educated, and had none of the pioneering spirit that Granddad had. she didn't like it. But to compensate for the discomforts, she decided and did organize Sunday school classes and study clubs. And this is one thing that I particularly remember about her and her experiences is that she organized the Proberian Club, study club in Weatherford, the Clinton Literary Club in Clinton, the Cultus Club in Elk City, and the Cosmopolitan Club in Sayre, all being study clubs which still are operative and which I know have added to the culture of these communities and the pleasure of women associating together.
Do you know of any of the activity in the early days of these clubs or any of the problems they had in operating a cultural club in a pioneering community?
They met in homes and I think in an occasion or two in the tent in which the folks lived. And the inherent desire of people then as now of having association together and studying the great works and the knowledge of literature prompted them all to continue and be very close-knit organizations.
Your grandmother's name again was what?
It's Mrs. Melvin A. Farr, M.A. Farr.
A. Farr, yes. When did you come to, when did you arrive in Clinton?
We arrived in Clinton in 1904, having been in Weatherford for 2 years prior to that. And my whole boyhood, my entire life since then has been here in Clinton.
Well, you came here only 1 year after the town's formed then, is that correct?
Yes.
Oh,
And I
right.
quite well remember that, see, Clinton was Clinton Junction for a long time, it being the junction of the Rock Island as it crossed the Frisco north and south, and the Rock Island east and west. And the warehouse that Granddad had at that time was at the junction, located right where the small depot is down there at the junction. And we had the Arapahoe hack originally, which traveled after each train arrival to Arapahoe and Custer City and back to Clinton to meet the train. And then, of course, all deliveries were made by horse-drawn equipment, wagons. And I've seen the town grow from a town site, which were put together on Indian land, which had to be purchased by congressional permission from the Indians.
What brought about the formation of a city here?
Its central western location. One of the things that my grandfather envisioned and promoted and very successfully was Clinton as a distribution center for commodities. In those days, carloads arrived and then were distributed by a warehousing agency which he developed. Farm implements, carloads of sugar, paper, well, all commodities. And so that his interests following his flour and feed business, which was a wholesale business, was a convenience to manufacturers to have their products within easy reach of merchants.
What area did he distribute to?
Well, all of Western Oklahoma, and one of his early day assertions to me was that Clinton would always be a distribution center. He hadn't at that time envisioned a distribution system by motor freight, which I later naturally drifted into, in that I was a third generation in the warehouse and distribution business, and most of the motor freight lines in Oklahoma that I know about originated from warehousemen and draymen. Actually, I was a drayman at one time, and concluded our differences with a wagon stake and a good deal of profanity. But that in those days, draymen and warehousemen at that point didn't have much social and no cultural standing. But Grandma Farr took care of that end of it pretty nicely.
What was your, were you involved in motor freight then later?
Yes.
What was your company?
Clinton Transfer and Storage Company, and which served 62 towns in western Oklahoma. And it was a natural outgrowth over the years. My son then was fourth generation in this business, and it was a natural outgrowth of distribution of merchandise from the old teaming days to the present day method of distribution.
Now, I understand there were some other distribution businesses that started very early. I believe one of them dealt with chickens.
Yes.
What was this company?
Well, that was Boring Kim Company. And Mrs. Kim, who was the wife of the Kim, has just recently died, and her relatives are all over this country. And E.M. Boring. And my grandfather financed the original produce house, we called it in that day, and loaned the money to Boring and Kim to start this business. Two young men who had come in here that he thought were pretty sharp, and they were, and became very successful. They finally sold out to Swift Company, I think.
Is Swift still operating?
The plant is no longer here, but they handled well. The chicken pickers were mostly women, but they had a force of as many as 100 or more dressing chickens and turkeys at the time they sold out and shipped to the New York, Chicago markets.
Can you tell me about the old cottonseed oil?
Not specifically, but it's been here as long as I can remember, and of course was established by the Wooten family at Chickasha. By the way, Jenkins is the husband of one of the second generation Wootens from Chickasha, and has a son, by the way, in Oklahoma City who's was in the automobile business, now is in the finance business.
Jenkins was from Chickasha?
No. My first recollection of Jenkins, well, no, he obviously initially was from the country, from the Payne County country, up in that area, because he came there, as a matter of fact, with his father.
Did you know him?
I've known him for a long time. As a matter of fact, he was the original, I believe the original, but one of the first, at any rate, J.C. Penney managers in Clinton.
Who was?
Jenkins, the son of, yes.
Did you know Governor Jenkins?
No, no, I did not know him. No.
Did you know any of the other governors? Did you have any close relationship with any other people who have played a prominent role in Oklahoma history?
Not of the early day governors. In the course of my business early experiences, I was I've been interested in scouting, of course, since its inception, and that's a good story in western Oklahoma. Well, a fellow came in here named John Wilson. He was a Methodist minister previously and had gotten interested in scouting. By the way, he writes a most interesting book of early day experiences in scouting. And he's now quite an old gentleman, but he's in Fort Worth, and he has to do with senior citizens' activities in the Methodist Church down there, and is almost nationally known, I guess. At any rate, he came in here and got us all enthused, and I've never been any good at as a scout leader, but I could raise money, so I became a Silver Beaver because I could raise money. But we had a tremendous organization of scouting in here in Clinton. And by the way, did you ever hear the Sons of Daniel Boone?
Oh yes, they were one of the preceding organizations.
Well,
are you familiar with them?
Well, I was a charter member, and
Tell about that.
The Mrs. Yakeley, who was a Presbyterian Sunday school teacher, got together a bunch of us boys, and we organized the Sons of Daniel Boone. And our charter, with 22 members' signatures, is dated July 12th, 1912. And I decoupaged a copy of that charter, which is out here at Western Trails Museum, and then have one in my home. And we were quite an organization. We went fishing, took fishing trips, and by the way, several of us made our spending money fishing catfish out of the Washita River before and after school, and set trout lines and all that sort of thing. But we had some wonderful camping trips on the Washita, And Miss Yankee took good care of us. It was a wonderful character-building organization, and we bought a two-roomed house. I don't know now how we raised the money, but we had a two-roomed house that's was located just north of Presbyterian Church at that time. And we paid for it with our own money and had our own clubhouse and quite a good organization.
What
Fine
year did you
organization.
join Sons of Daniel Boone?
In 1912.
1912. Now, Sons of Daniel Boone, along with Boy Rangers and the Dan Beard organization,
Yes.
all eventually moved into
Into Scouting.
National Scouting.
That's right.
But when did they move in? The National Scouting was started in 1910, and
We still had the organization
Still had
here.
something
Yeah,
there.
so I guess that was had gone in. We'd never heard of Boy Scouts at
You
that
had not,
time. No.
of course, there were some in Paul Huska, for example. There was a scout
Well.
group that was started direct out of the England.
Oh, out from England. Yeah.
I'm still with these groups.
Yeah. Well, good.
I've been active quite a number of
Well,
years.
congratulations. I think that's great.
In fact, I was a unit leader for 16 years.
Oh, yeah.
Scout.
Well, I could never do any good with boys, but I was
The,
interested in finance.
And of course the Boy Ranger organization, which was remained as the Boy Ranger organization, although for a while it was close to, had scattered membership, and then gradually kind of dropped back to the area where it was chartered, which was in.
We then, getting back to the cultural influence on Western Oklahoma, if the Farr family may have had any, and I think we did. My dad was interested in Chautauqua promotions, and of course had Brian and all these fellas here in a tent.
Yes. Now,
And,
I picked up in one of our other interviews this afternoon with Mr. Bodenhammer about Mr. Bryan's speech on Fourth of
Yeah,
July.
well,
Tell about Mr. Bryan.
I don't know that I can, except that
You
I
weren't
know he
able
was
to either, other than the fact that he was impressed by him. I
he
wonder
was
what
a
he
forceful
said.
speaker.
Yes.
He was a forceful speaker, and I remember his gestures and his booming voice and his delightful presentation in a tent. But then I know that my dad was on the committee, I think chairman of the committee, that was promoting the Chautauqua at that time.
Well, now he ran for president, 3 times, I believe, but I believe he ran the year Theodore Roosevelt was elected, which was 1904, when he came in the second term. I believe it's correct. Was it in anticipation of this 1904 election that Bryan was?
I'm sorry, I don't remember. I've tried to recall that. I don't know that.
I suspect that was. I don't remember whether he ran the next year when Taft was elected or not, whether he ran in that race or not.
Well, later, of course, came along these speaking bureaus when we had outstanding speakers,
Who are
4 or
some of
5
them you
or 8 or
had,
10. Well, in this case, they were mostly, we had all the top ones. But in this case, it was, we had several years where we had series of speakers that were recommended by Rotary International on various subjects, And then later came along community concerts, which my wife was interested in, and then later came along these kids that are doing a marvelous job on Playhouse and all this sort of thing. So Clinton's had a cultural program going all the time.
Have you had your own theater program here?
Yes.
Tell about it.
I'm not qualified to tell about it specifically,
You don't know.
except that I enjoy it.
Yeah. What
But
is it
these
called?
youngsters have...
I'm thinking not necessarily of what you have now. I'm thinking of any of maybe the old things that you've had. Do you recall any of the first specific theater or musical groups that you had in Oklahoma, in Clinton?
No. Oh, yes, I do. And this will be interesting. The Clinton Rexall Band. The Clinton Rexall Band was put together by the Rexall dealer, E.F. Rockwood, who not only put the band together, but instructed the boys in the several instruments in his prescription room between waiting on the trades. And we had uniforms and played special concerts at the Oklahoma State Fair for 2 or 3 days. And And that would have been in about 1912 to 16, 17. And I was the assistant band director and the cornetist. They were cornets in those days, not trumpets. And we played fairs at Thomas and played fairs at Clinton and all that sort of thing. And he was a fine influence on the young men in this town. Great, just simply great. He's dead now. He later moved to Wichita and has returned here on several occasions, and we were delighted to get together to recall and honor him, recall his work here and honor him. But that Clinton Rexall band was pretty good deal.
Can you think of any other old cultural in the, I'll say from 1903 to 1925, any other of the cultural events or organizations you had?
Well, of course, our high school always had plays, which of course have continued. There wasn't anything special that I know of.
Was there a
No.
community theater during the early years?
No, not that I recall.
What about athletic teams? I understood you had a baseball team.
Yes, we had a professional baseball team, as a matter of fact, and kind of sandlot deal. And Eve Monroe, who is our attorney, one of the leading attorneys here, and is the county. Well, he's just retired. He was one of the first county attorneys. That is, he had 6 counties. I've forgotten the title at any rate. But Monroe came out here from the University of Oklahoma, and he could tell you a lot about early baseball history. We had a good team and a lot of fun.
What was your professional team called?
Gee, I don't remember.
Do you remember who they played?
We played all the towns around. Pretty hot games.
Do you recall in the baseball area any particular games or any particular events that are memorable?
Well, yes, but it probably ought not to be recorded. I didn't play baseball, but I was a fan, and we went down to Cordell one time, and the game ended up with ball bats and brick bats, and it wasn't. A bunch of guys got peeled. There was quite a rivalry between Cordell and Clinton.
Who won the fight?
I don't even remember that. It's like most fights, nobody did.
Usually the one who wins the game loses the fight.
Yeah.
Were there any other athletic teams or events that are highlights in Clinton?
Well, Clinton didn't have a football team until about 1916, 17. Had basketball teams, but I don't recall that.
In the area of civic leadership over the years in Clinton, sometimes maybe it's best to kind of compartmentalize them. Do you remember, say, from the area of when you first arrived up until between then and World War I, who do you recall as outstanding civic, business, or education leaders in Clinton?
Well, there was certainly Tom Nance, who was one of the who laid out Clinton and started the town site. The Strongs were always an influence, a business influence, and progressive in this area. Clint Strong. No, Clint Strong was in the automobile business and real estate business and one thing and another, and he's quite a progressive person. And then he and several men put together the Clinton and Oklahoma Western Railroad, which you probably have had some information on. And that was quite an event when that had been completed and everybody from Clinton got on flat cars and went out to Butler and Cheyenne and all that sort of thing. Well, here again, I'd have to think about that. I mean, these things that you ask me don't come to mind too quickly.
Well, what happened?
But, well, it was just a gala celebration to get the new railroad started. And see, another reason for Clinton, this brings to mind, being a distribution center, is its central location in the railroad. See, we had 4 railroads: Rock Island, Frisco, Santa Fe, And Clinton and Oklahoma Western, which has since been purchased by and connects with Santa Fe, was purchased by Santa Fe. And that made quite a distribution center here, and of course we had the shops here, had the headquarters here, and had quite a business and a bonanza in that they connected with these railroads out about 2 or 3 miles west of town and got 20 or 30% of the gross revenue, bringing the cars on for their portion of their transportation, bringing them into Clinton. So it made for quite a profitable operation.
Was this a kind of a goodwill tour of a flat car that they made?
Yes, it was just a celebration of the completing of the railroad.
And what happened?
It was just a good time. They came out and came back.
This was kind of like Chamber of Commerce trip.
Well, yeah, it's kind of an open house.
Yeah. Did they have? Did they bring a band with them or anything?
Oh,
like
yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You remember what year that was?
A couple of kegs of beer and a roar. No, I don't recall.
I understood that they had quite a celebration on the opening or beginning of Clinton. I was told about a balloon ascension. Were you at that picnic where they had the balloon ascension?
Well, I don't recall it being the first, but we had balloon ascensions in those days. I helped hold down some of them while they filled them.
Mr. Wadsworth was telling us about the balloon ascension where the signal to parachute didn't click, and he eventually rode the balloon up and down when he was supposed to parachute it down.
I don't recall that.
You don't remember that one.
We had the biggest crowd that Barnum and Bailey Circus had ever, Ringling Brothers. I guess, was it Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey at that time? I'm not sure. But up to that point, and back in that'd be about 25 or 6, somewhere in there, maybe 30, we had the largest crowd that had ever attended a Ringling Brothers Circus performance in Clinton. Had to bring in all their hay and couldn't do some of their arena acts because of the lack of room on account of spectators. That was quite an event.
They came around from everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
The parades were quite a thing.
Yes, oh, wonderful, yeah.
Tell us about the 4th of July picnics. I understood they had some big.
Well, there's nothing unusual about them. They were characteristic of the times in that there were always political aspirants or on speakers or political speakers, and pop and lemonade and side shows and wrestling matches and boxing matches and livestock show and the whole thing combined for 2 or 3 days, and they were quite gala affairs. But they were characteristic of that day. I don't recall that there was anything. They were certainly outstanding to me at the time, but I don't now consider them any special event except for the moment.
Who are some of the people of Clinton who have played a role in the statewide level, whether it be in the political area or whether it be in education or in business or something?
There are a good many of them. Charlie Engelman, for instance, has been president of the Oklahoma Publishers Association, Oklahoma Press Association. Dr. Rogers was president of the Oklahoma Medical Association. Dr. Lamb and Dr. Rogers were, Dr. Ellis Lamb and Dr. McLean Rogers were both fellows. That degree is, or honorarium, I guess, is outstanding surgeons and physicians nationally. And Jeff Stratton has probably had more of recognition than any other person in Clinton, he having been president of the National School Board Members Association, state as well, National Cotton Growers Association. He's been in the high echelon for a good long time in cotton, in the activity of cotton research. and is a member or president of the Board of Regents, as you know. And I would say he probably has done more to publicize Clinton outside of Clinton than any other person in it. Then Bill Brazel, member of the Rotary Club, has been state president of the Cleaners Association, as has Douglas Myers, and I think Douglas is presently on the national board. Oh, there are numerous. There are numerous men in Clinton who have been outstanding. I've served on the International Board of Rotary, and I've been on 7 or 8 international committees. I've been active in Rotary all the time.
When was the Rotary Club formed?
It was 50 years old a year ago.
Your Clinton Club.
In 1920.
1920. Who was the first president of the Clinton Club?
It was I.U. Smith, who was at that time. It was 50 years old a year ago.
Your Clinton Club.
In 1920.
1920. Who was the first president of the Clinton Club?
It was I.U. Smith, who was at that time in the hardware business, and later was associated with the Oklahoma National Bank.
What have been the outstanding? Is that the oldest civic club in Clinton?
Yes.
What have been some of the outstanding activities, promotions or activities of the Rotary Club?
Well, since 1920, we've sponsored a scout troop. We presently are instrumental in improving a Rotary Nance Park. We spent about $1,000 a year on that. We had a good deal to do in helping Dr. McLean Rogers, who was then mayor, in developing our Clinton Park, which you may or may not have seen. And for years, we were 100%, had 100% membership in crippled children's, what do you call it? Crippled children, well, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Society. And Harry Bartlett, Ms. Rogers and Ms. Harry Bartlett were kind of spearheaded that. We've had 2 4th of July celebrations where we entertain everybody from Rotary funds, and big picnic for everybody, sort of a old-time picnic thing, and have sent a young man to Australia for 2 months as a member of the group study exchange team, and have entertained 7 Australians on a return trip for some time. We're one of the outstanding clubs in the district, which comprises 33 clubs, and our contribution to the Rotary Foundation, which has to do with international student exchange.
What about the Chamber of Commerce? When was it established?
I'm sorry, I don't know.
You're not familiar?
No. I've been a member of the Chamber of Commerce always, and I've been on the board, but I haven't been specifically connected with the activity.
What do you recall any of the principal promotions of the Chamber of Commerce over the years?
Well, the first one that was really outstanding was the location of the tubercular sanitarium here in Clinton. We raised, well, here again, Dr. McLean Rogers led that thing, and we raised $25,000, $30,000, $40,000. G.C. Wheeler, who was the deceased president of Oklahoma National Bank, was quite active in that work. It would be a little detailed and certainly normal course of events, but it seems to me our Chamber of Commerce has been very instrumental in bringing industry into Clinton. It was a long, long struggle. I was 10 or 12 years on the industrial committee. We were just fighting a losing battle all the time, and we couldn't seem to influence industry to this area. But at that time, and I still feel that it was because of our state laws, which were not favorable to industry moving into Oklahoma. There was an influx into Arkansas, which I attribute almost wholly to the atmosphere which prevailed in Arkansas in bringing industry into the state. And of course, when you get that down to that, why that gets down to dollar. You know, not necessarily location or facilities or anything. But then, and I don't know that the Chamber of Commerce could be congratulated for this altogether, but they've certainly been a factor. They've been a factor in that Clinton has a representative or an office or a branch office of practically every state and federal division of state and federal government. And this in itself that people just fail to realize is worth every bit as much as, well, they constitute small industries, as a matter of fact. And we have a lot of that.
What do you recall as major disasters, thinking in terms of fires, tornadoes, that sort of thing, that have taken place in Clinton over the years you've been here?
Well, we've had several cyclones here, and I've seen two of them, but none of them have been what I'd consider disasters.
Same with fire.
Yes. We had, of course, well, my warehouse burned clear to the ground. That was a disaster for me, and I wasn't even here. I didn't know about it for 2 days. The oil mill burned at one time, but was immediately rebuilt. We've never had any unusual fire that I recall downtown.
Someone said that the cotton oil mill got blown halfway down right before it was ever completed by a cyclone.
Well, that could have been. That could have been.
What do you feel over the period of years? This stretches a lot of time, and you may want to name more than one rather than to try to single out one. But what do you feel as those real outstanding events or occurrences in Clinton? Now this could be a single event, or it could be the metamorphosis of something.
Well, let me think about that a minute.
Thinking now of major events that took place in Clinton.
I believe that the early major event was the establishment of Clinton proper upon the hill instead of down by the river at the junction, maybe. And then following that, it was quite an event when the bridges were built across the Washita River, because the Washita was noted for its flooding, and there were numerous times when you couldn't get out of Clinton to the east or to the north. So we had a big ribbon cutting when those events happened, and that was an event, because we had a flood about every year. Then when the concrete strip was built on the old 66 highway, and I could get my trucks into town without a great big expense and hassle and sometimes delay and wrecks, why, that to me was an event. And we never thought we'd live to see the day when we'd have a 4-lane I-40. And certainly the completion of I-40 was a tremendous event for Clinton and all of Western Oklahoma, as a matter of fact. Then the advent of the Clinton and Oklahoma Western Railway system and its completion was a time for celebration. Bringing the Western Oklahoma Tubercular Hospital to Clinton was quite an event, and a good deal of money was raised quite voluntarily, $25,000–$30,000 for a small community when that came to Clinton, and it's been quite an asset all these years. And by the way, do you know about what's to be done with it now? Well, there were 3 tubercular hospitals in Oklahoma state operated, and this hospital out here was initially designed for 300 or more patients, as was Tahlequah, and I believe the colored was at Boley, which was, it didn't take long for that to close, and then the patient load in the 2 hospitals reduced to 50 and sometimes less because of the advance in medical treatments for tuberculosis, all of which were had at both these hospitals. And now and this is another thing that the Chamber of Commerce did, and that was to have an almost continuous hassle to keep the charity hospital and the tubercular hospital open, and appropriations made for its continued use. Well, now the plan is to consolidate the 2 out at the tubercular site, and we'll start spending about $2.5 million out there in the immediate future, June, July, to make it a complete center, which will serve 22 counties in western Oklahoma and have all the medical attention and devices and processes available. Even to, it sort of intrigues me by remote control having an intensive care center to which a patient's pulse can be piped, so that even in Woodward or Aldous or wherever, he can have immediate attention. And this is going to develop in one of the really advanced medical centers, in my opinion. So that was an event which has led to this present expansion. And then I think we discussed it. The baseball team, of course, was an event because the whole town was following Eve and his baseball team. And the building of the Clinton Library, after a grant of a location had been given by Dr. McBurney and Ms. McBurney, and she probably could give you more history than anybody else in this area. She now has just recently moved to Oklahoma City.
As you observe the library, what can you tell me about it? I probably visited it first too, but this will give me a second from a personal point of view.
The dedication of 2 women to a library with limited finance was truly a work of love, and not only did they provide all the books that they could buy, they initiated and Ms. Farr and I actually started the memorial bookshelf, which was started way back there in 1936, I think, or 7, and has grown so that there are a good many contributions to that made. Well, that helped the financial situation in the early days. Then the McBurneys gave this site, and we voted the bond issue to build a library, and we've served then without additional charge to the out-of-town people the whole county area.
These 2 women, could you give me their names again?
Well, there was Perdita Alvord, and I don't recall the other woman's name at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Talking in terms of the Clinton Sherman Base, you were telling, I know that I'll probably get some information from 3 or 4 different areas, but from your personal experience and personal involvement in your business, what can you tell me about Clinton Sherman,
Yes, it was naval base, and all these troops who were assigned here are amazed that they were coming to the Plains country, because they couldn't imagine why a Navy man would be out in this neck of the woods. And but actually, it developed that it was a highly technical base, and and men assigned to this base were screened down to the point to where there's some of the finest technicians and finest young men in the entire armed services. They were all just top men. And what it developed that they were doing was experimenting on drones, unmanned bombers. And they never did get the thing perfected here until the war was over. But I'm sure that the activities here led to improved techniques and so on.
I believe you were talking about when they first called on you, or because you were in the trucking industry, or you in the transportation industry?
No, I was then, and I was up till through the Second World War.
You were called on by some CV representatives.
Well, the man in charge of construction was a CB, and when he came, I made it a point, of course, from a business standpoint, to get acquainted with him. And as a result of our friendship and that of the succeeding commanders and so on, I did actually deliver everything but carloads out there to the base. It was strictly a business proposition of me, of course. Wasn't any.
Now, let's see, you mentioned that part, you mentioned the library, you told the background of the hospital. Can you think of anything else that maybe...
Well, bringing the Kellwood Corporation manufacturing plant here was quite an event, yes. I didn't have anything special to do with that. The Chamber of Commerce, I don't think I had anything, as a matter of fact. But the Chamber of Commerce Committee and Board did a tremendous job in bringing that. And they brought them on a basis where they're permanent and where they are not an obligation, actually an asset in every way to the community, rather than some of the plants that have been moved into Oklahoma towns and have not had the right background to survive.
Could you tell about that plant, how many people they have and what they're making?
Yes, they make nothing at all but bedspreads, quilted bedspreads, and drapes. And they don't have to go sell their product. It's all taken on order by Sears. Actually, Kellwood is a division of Sears. And they employ, I think they're working 3 shifts now, and employ about 350 people. He's asking me a bunch of questions that you ought to be answering, and I'm left them for you.
Yeah, well, we're good. That's all right.
See, you know about, for instance, just now, about this Kellwood plant coming in and all that sort of thing.
Go ahead.
One of my boyhood recollections is an Indian baby being born on Main Street in front of W.G. Ball's meat market in the early day. And, well, it was just an event that was most unusual in that it was on Main Street. She was taken care of right away, and the birth was successful and all that sort of thing. Then one of my earliest recollections are the saloons in Clinton. I recall that there were 14 of them, and the outstanding saloon, which I wasn't permitted to go near, was George Schultz. And then another one that I recall, it's right down there near the building where Hal Bodenhammer now is. They built a 6-foot 1-by-12 fence in the back, which was kind of the bullpen where they threw the drunks. And the boys used to go down and look through the knotholes to see who the drunks were at the moment. Then one early recollection was I spoke of fishing in the Washita River. Before the dams were built in Chickasha, the electrical dams, in Chickasha, there were some really big catfish in the river. And the largest one that I recall was 47 pounds. They brought it up to this W.G. Ball meat market. and a couple of fellows carrying it between a pole on their shoulder, and the tail was dragging the ground. So there used to be big catfish in this area up here. Then it hadn't been mentioned, but and I hadn't. A few of us anymore think about its being an event, but probably the greatest thing of all that ever happened to Western Oklahoma was the advent of soil conservation. And as you know, this immediate area was the trial area for the entire United States, and the transformation of this country from a Dust Bowl area to our present state, with I think 123 farm ponds in the county, with practically every farm terraced, and then with the knowledge of the farmers through soil conservation work of how to handle land and preserve the land and stop both wind erosion and water erosion, as probably, well, without a doubt, has done more for our economy in Western Oklahoma than any other thing.
Were any people locally play a responsibility in that?
Oh, yes. Dr. Lloyd Church, who now lives in eastern Oklahoma. Where? Dr. Church lives in Wilburton now, and was certainly one of the leaders in soil conservation, as was Red Males in Cheyenne, and Jess DeWeese. Yeah. They were the early day people who really got with it, along with Joe Jordan. Marshall Jordan, who was actually in charge of the area, I guess, and still is.
You go ahead, you can talk to me later, because I got an appointment at 4 o'clock.
Oh, have you?
Yeah.
Well, all right.
I'll be
But
back.
break in any time you get back.
Okay.
Come on, because I'm about talked out.
Why don't you talk a little about the Dust Bowl days and some of how it affected both from the physical standpoint, what it looked like, what it was like, and also how it affected the area.
Well, when you think of Dust Bowl days, you think of dust. And we have dust in this country, there's no question about it. And when the wind gets high, we not only have dust, we have pebbles. But the really oppressive Dust Bowl days did not occur from either. They occurred from volcanic ash, which came from western Colorado and eastern Kansas and up in Nebraska in that area. To the extent that the sky was completely blackened. I recall particularly sitting in our living room in Clinton, across the street from the Clinton Hospital, a matter of less than 100 feet, or about, say, 100 feet, but not any more than that. When a cloud came out of the north in a rolling, not turbulent, but in a slowly rolling cloud, and engulfed the town to where we could not see the hospital across the street. And this dust was not a dust as you think of it. It permeated the air. And it didn't make a bit of difference how tight your house was. The air was permeated with dust. To the extent that I and a good many people had a lot of nasal trouble. And in that regard, we had one of the finest doctors you can possibly imagine, and his cure for these nasal difficulties are intravenous shots of mercurochrome, which a lot of people didn't use, but which actually did me some good. But the mental depressive that if that's the correct word, that caused was just simply awful. Now we're having a drought now, but we're not having Dust Bowl days because most of this land is treated so that it's either cultivated to keep wind erosion or else it has a cover crop. But people were merchants, farmers, were just giving up. And many of them lost everything they had. Many of them left from, some of them left from disgust, but many of them left because they just couldn't make a living. Times were tough. No question about it. So, along came the soil conservation program, and that's the reason I say we couldn't, our country would be completely gone if it had not been for this program. Of course, one of the things that caused the Dust Bowl days was the cultivation of submarginal land. It never should have been put into cultivation. It's grassland to start with, always had been, and that's all it's good for now. And since it's been returned to grassland, well, we've eliminated a lot of that, along with keeping the water on the land. Not now.
It's been an interview with Mr. Doane R. Farr, April 1971 in Clinton, Oklahoma. Thank you very much, Mr. Farr.